Oh, there we go. It's on. Okay. Hey there. I've got Nick Provenzano with me. We've known each other for a while, I guess. How long has it been?
A couple of Philadelphia ISTEs ago, you came to my
Yeah.
poster session, so that is about
Uh, 8
8 years.
years ago. It was a while ago. Was it?
Yeah, 8 or 9 years ago.
So, yeah, we've been friends for a while, and I'm just going to be asking Nick a bunch of questions about the maker movement, maker culture, his own maker journey. So, I want to start out with this first question of it kind of seems out of place to people that you were a high school English teacher. That's not who people associate with the maker movement, maker projects, all that kind of stuff. So, um, how does a high school English guy get super into maker spaces, maker stuff?
Yeah, it's probably the most common question I would get when I present on making and talk to people. They say, "Well, what is being an English teacher? How does that even connect to maker spaces?" And
Hmm.
for me, the connection was really simple and really fluid, really, because I've always been a project-based learning teacher.
Hmm.
So for me, giving kids opportunities to demonstrate understanding through exploring concepts and ideas or presentation processes to present what they know, um, that was a simple transition to makerspaces because makerspaces is about giving kids access to tools to create things.
Hmm.
So for my kids, I wanted to give them access to other tools that they wouldn't have access to at home to create things for presentation. So an example, like a simple one, would be like a green screen.
Hmm.
You know, kids don't have a green screen at home, at least most don't. And if they wanted to do videos for presentations, having a green screen is just a nice little fun thing. So I went online, Amazon, and got a nice big, huge green
Yeah.
fabric green screen thing, and then throw it up on the wall in the library. And from there, he started to build other things around it. And as kids started to talk more about 3D printing, 3D design, it was giving kids an opportunity to use tools for presentations that they didn't have access to before. And ultimately, if you think about like a library and what it is, a library will have poster boards, it'll have markers and things like that. For me, I just viewed it as how is it any different for a kid going down to use poster boards and markers for the same presentation a teacher has seen every year for 15 years versus going down to the library, grabbing a Chromebook, doing some 3D design on Tinkercad, and printing something. They're tools, and
Yeah.
as long as it's approached from that idea that these are tools for kids to use, it applies to any content area in the curriculum.
So I think that's one of the key things that people they get wrapped up around. It's like, the maker spaces are about engineering, and then they say it's about STEM, and then they say it's about STEAM, and then that always drove me crazy because I was like, how about history? Like, we make history all the time. Like, history's all about creativity. And so, one of the things you kind of hit on right there is that this idea that like every subject can be a maker space, right? Like, theater is a maker space. Um, English can involve making, whether it's 3D printing or video design, or I always felt like people would when I taught a STEM class and then a journalism class, they would refer to my classroom as a makerspace when they walked in and they saw people doing STEM stuff. And then suddenly they would call it a studio when we were doing photojournalism, and it was the same space. So, what do you think is the relationship between, I guess, maker spaces, maker movement, and this idea of interdisciplinary learning?
Well, I think when you look at this maker movement, this makerspace idea, some of the veterans of the teaching profession they've been hemming and hawing a little bit at this maker movement because it's been here and it's gone and it's been back and it's gone. They had their shop classes, these classes that were an integral part of schools. They've been there. Art classes, design classes, architecture class, a lot of these classes that fell by the wayside in the about mid to late 80s, 90s, 2000s are now coming back with just new and fancier tools. And
Yeah.
some of the veteran teachers have said, this isn't new. But it is new when it's new to an entire generation of educators that don't remember a shop class. They don't remember, you know, having a group of kids fix a car during lunch. So it's like a normal thing. Like these were skills that kids were picking up in a sort of real world environment for them. So this maker movement is creating a space that tends to be focused in the library as the media center, the hub of the school, that allows kids to now continue to explore other areas of learning outside the curriculum, to be honest. So if the school doesn't have a 3D design program, which many don't, having a 3D printer will allow kids to explore 3D design on their own. And along with that, the geometry involved, the physics of designing something so it doesn't fall apart or fall over as it's printing. I mean, these are aspects that go across all curricular, or the idea of writing directions of something that you've created so that a person after you can recreate it, or blogging about these experiences on your website or something like that. So the cross-curricular aspects are all there. It's about giving the kids the freedom to explore it at their own pace or in their own free time, which is what I found Makerspaces really allow students to do, is to come before school, after school, during their lunches, you know, their time, to engage in stuff that's interesting to them. And you have a lot of kids that wouldn't be engaged in this learning environment otherwise. So that's so that's what I've seen as a bonus.
So one of the things that I hear all the time from people is, you know, like you kind of hit on it, this isn't new, right? And I feel that way about almost anything you say, it isn't new, right? Right? Like, but that's also like the value of, I feel like all innovation is iteration, right? It's always something new that's a variation on what's old. You know, some of my favorite, I love baseball, and my favorite baseball stadium when I was a kid was Camden Yards, which was radically new by being vintage, right? Like by being old. And so it has me wondering about this idea of, you know, what role do you see in either the analog, the physical, the non-technical, the vintage within a makerspace?
One of my favorite things I like to say about makerspaces is that it can be for robotics and it can be for knitting.
Yeah, I love that.
You know, for me,
puppets in the case of Sam, which I love, right? Like,
yeah, making is creating something that didn't exist before, and if someone comes down there and teaches themselves to cross stitch, that's a success. That is something someone was interested in, researched it, and then started to make things, and that's what a makerspace is. And so there is a big emphasis on technology, and like, I get it, like being able to code and doing these things are important. Teaching myself how to code and using Raspberry Pi and making computers, and like those things are neat, and those are skills that I learned on my own by basically creating my own little makerspace in my house. Like, if you think about it, a lot of us growing up, our parents, our dads had their own makerspace, didn't they? They had their little area where their tools were, and you know, I vividly remember my dad's space, and I would never call it a makerspace, but that's what it was. He built things down there. It was his own little space. So, you know, giving kids this similar experience of having their own space and having kids involved in the creation of this space is so huge because it's ownership, right? So having kids come and knit and color and do origami if they want to, like these low-tech things, or at the same time, give them makey and have them start to play with circuits, paper circuits, and things like that.
Or I love the idea of like mashing the two up. I mean, like that's essentially, like I've gotten really into doing these like sketchy videos, right? Like, and people will say, what app do you use? And it's like, well, I draw it by hand and scan it into a computer because I like drawing things with, like I like pencils and I like pens, and, or, you know, whiteboard videos with students with the same kind of thing, common craft style videos. Like it's this mashup idea. I love using, I love looking at some of your examples, and maybe you want to share a couple for people who don't know you, like examples where you did something that was one part vintage, cool, old school, and one part Raspberry Pi. Like, so what are some of those mashups that you've done?
It'd probably be my lunchbox. Wait 1 second, it's right here.
All right.
Oh, awkward dead air time. It's terrible.
It's okay. I could do like an elevator music. All right,
So
let's see
this
it.
is a lunchbox, a Gremlins lunchbox. I think I found this at a thrift shop or something like that. So it was just sitting in my house for the longest time. And one morning I woke up and said, wouldn't it be cool if I could put a computer inside of it? Like any normal person.
Because why wouldn't you, right?
Right? So I started to think, and I like brainstormed in my head for a while. And I put together a computer that is fully functioning and works. And right now it's got a retro gaming system installed on the operating system. So this bad boy will turn on. There it goes. It's turning on, right? The biggest fear is that nothing works when you want it to show it off.
Right, yeah, that's awesome.
And I got a little Bluetooth controller.
Oh, wow.
Right, I know. There you go. It's a little loading up a little picture there. And I put a little speaker in there. It's got a small handheld keyboard, so if I need to do anything, type in any code. And the entire thing runs on a micro SD card.
Wow.
So
okay.
I can actually swap out the micro SD card because the Pi is actually in the back there, so those you can kind of see it behind the screen. And so the micro SD card is what the brain of a Raspberry Pi is. So if I wanted to, I can swap out the retro gaming, and then I can just put in the Raspbian OS, which now I have a full functioning Wi-Fi enabled computer. The biggest test is going to be tomorrow when I try to get on a plane with it. So,
right. I learned the hard way last week. I was traveling. I did a keynote in Wisconsin and I was coming back, and I didn't think anything of it. I had my my podcasting microphone, just like a blue mic, nothing fancy. And like suddenly, like they're searching, they've got 7 people, and it's like, and I was like, it's just it's a podcasting microphone. So good luck on that.
I went back from England. I was speaking at Raspberry Pi's 5th anniversary birthday party. And I was on the way back to the U.S. I was in England, and I sent all my stuff, and I had a ton of Raspberry Pis. I mean, they're credit card size, they're computer boards. And well, I totally got pulled over, and this woman's like, what are these things? Like, you're traveling. And then her friend came over. She goes, oh, that's Raspberry Pi. My son loves those. And she's I was like, thank goodness, because I was like, I don't even know where to begin, like, at the start. But so, yeah, tomorrow I'm going to get to the airport real early.
So a most awkward pullover that I saw at the TSA, completely unrelated. They pulled this guy aside. I don't know who he is at the time. And they said, like, you need to stop. And he was like, oh, man. And they said, we need to talk to you. And it was Lovie Smith. And they said, you've got to come back to the Bears. And it's like the TSA, they were pulling him aside to try to convince him that he doesn't need to coach at Illinois, which I thought was just hilarious. I was like, uh-oh, this is going to get ugly. But it turned out to be like just 3 TSA, like the line gets backed up because they're all trying to convince him like to go back. So you know, I want to say something about you know, first of all, I love your journey toward kind of the maker spaces, maker movement, maker mindset. And the first thing I'd say ahead of time is like people talk about the maker mindset. Before you were doing a bunch of maker space stuff, I think you've always had a maker mindset, right? Like it didn't start when you got into Raspberry Pi. You had this as a kid, you had this as a teacher. So the mindset was there ahead of time. But when it comes to kind of expanding out to some of those other things, the things that people are, to be honest, terrified of. A lot of teachers are really afraid to try out Raspberry Pi or try out Arduino or try out any of those types of things. So maybe if you would share that journey a little bit, because you kind of shared the classroom journey, but your personal journey. And I just want to do a quick plug, which I love that side of your book. So, you know, before you share this journey, I just want to say the cool thing about your book is you're so approachable, right? You're not somebody who's like telling people that they're doing it the wrong way. You're not like, quoting 95 different journal articles. It's just like, hey, this is me. This is the maker space. This is the maker movement. This is what I've done. These are things you could try out. And it really is truly a starter's guide. Like, it's an approachable starter's guide. It's not a how-to book. It's a get inspired, read it. It's a fast read. It's an easy read, not in a bad way, but it's not a like you're doing it wrong, feel horrible about yourself book. It's a, you know, the criticism would be it's a feel good book, but I don't think that's a criticism. I think that's a really good thing. I read it and was like, I want to try this and I want to try that. So go ahead. And
I mean, what it was just, I did this, I created this maker space and I went through this process. And so all I wanted to do was just share what I did. And I've been very lucky for people to connect with it and buy it, and schools use it for book studies. And that's like so amazing to be able to do that, and to Google Hangout in with some of these teachers and connect with them. I just yesterday connected with a teacher in Canada who bought the book and wanted me to talk to his students about making, and you know, that sort of mentality of what it means to make things and fail and try again. You know, the book was just, I don't know, a silly adventure, you know, and filled with pop culture references. And you know, I've always been a maker. I have, and I moved away from it. You know, at one point I was told, you know, this type of stuff is for people that are good at science, and you're not good at science. Or
yeah, well, tell me a little bit more about that, because I do think that's one of the things that prevents us is like there's this image we have that you have to be this science/engineering thing that you're not.
I was told at a young age, one, that I was not a very good drawer, so I shouldn't put a whole lot of money on that.
Me too. Yeah.
And you know, that impacted me as a young kid. I was like, okay, I don't want to draw, and doing all the artwork for my book was something.
That's a creative risk that I love that you took.
I took a lot of pride in, just because I know I might not be considered this master artist or whatever, but you know, these were my drawings and my thoughts, and you know, I really wanted to put that in there. So you know, that for me was like really sort of risk-taking, in the sense of I've been told like since I was little that, oh, I'm not a good drawer, and I've always kind of laughed at it and, you know, talked to students about it. I go, listen, no matter how bad you are, you're not as bad as me, right? Topping out at like stick figures. I was told, and like I wasn't. My problem is I'm dyslexic, and I say problem. I shouldn't say problem, but you know, it's an issue. I'm dyslexic, and so when it comes to science and math, that's a huge problem. It's a huge problem.
Yeah.
And I went to private Catholic school, so special ed didn't exist. So there was no accommodations. I was just told to work harder and pray. So you know, it installed. It's frustrating that it installed an awesome work ethic for me, because I had to work harder than everyone else. I had to work really hard for my C's, like super hard, like before school, after school, like I earned those C's, and I felt good about those C's in my math classes. Like I did. You know, my science classes were interesting, but you know, things like chemistry, my brain was just like, nope, you're not going to do this, right? So interesting, but I was always told that this was not an area I was going to excel in, and that's just fine. The ultimate irony of becoming an English teacher that's dyslexic, you know, is not lost on me, and it's not lost on my students when I tell them that.
But do you think that, I mean, do you think between the dyslexia, the feeling like you're not an artist, feeling like you're not a scientist, and then you're doing all this maker stuff, you're teaching English, like, do you think that those pieces make you more empathetic towards students who are struggling?
Well, they definitely, like, I can definitely connect with those kids and understand. At the same time, though, I don't take any of this, you know, well, I just can't mentality from them. That drives me insane, this sort of defeatist attitude where, you know, I can say, I have trouble reading and I teach reading and writing for a living. I don't want to hear it when you say it's too hard. You know, that sometimes that edge to me where I'm like, listen, I had to bust my butt, you know, bust your butt. And, you know, for me, not wanting to read, I mean, there's a reason I didn't read a lot in high school, because it was tough. It was exhausting. But once I sort of like trained myself how to do it and do it effectively, and it was fine. And teaching myself how to code is not a fun, easy thing to do
Yeah.
because you miss a period, you flip a word here. You do those things, it crashes the entire code. So it's sort of best that I'm teaching myself at my own pace because I would probably drive someone nutty just
Hmm.
because I would listen to everything they would say, and my brain would swear that I typed it out exactly the way they told me to, but then one thing would be wrong, and then you're
Yeah.
going through these lines of code. Um, so those deficiencies or uh, I don't know, off way that my brain is wired, taught me a lot of hard work and that annoying word called grit, which
Hmm.
is super fun and popular for people to say. It taught me to persevere and
Hmm.
try new things. And the amount of times I've burned my fingers with a soldering iron, and the amount of times I've programmed something that didn't work, and
So when it comes to that, like, I mean, you mentioned the soldering iron, the physical making stuff, the programming, like I said, the Raspberry Pi, all that different stuff. When did you start kind of that journey?
a year and a half ago,
Okay. And how
my
did that start?
my students were working with Raspberry Pi, and I'm an obsessive person. It's like when I
Hmm.
decide I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it until I do it really, really well, and then I'll go on to the next challenge. So
Hmm.
some kids were playing the Raspberry Pi, never heard of it, no idea. Conceptual, I was like, I don't know. So went home over break, ordered some stuff on Amazon, and then just started to play with it. I was like, oh, okay, it does this does that. And what if I can do that? And then I started to watch some kits online and ordered a kit and built something, and I was like, okay, I get it. And it was
Real quick, if anybody's like, when people eventually view this, I just want to point out that one of the upsides of what Nick's describing is that it's not terribly expensive.
it's
Right? Like
not.
it's a low barrier of entry compared to what you might think it
A
is.
Raspberry Pi will cost you $35. It comes with built-in Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. Odds are you already have a keyboard and mouse at home and a HD monitor to plug everything into. An entire kit that comes with all the wires and everything like that you can get online for about 50 or $60.
Hmm.
Uh, again, which might be a lot for some people, but as an entryway into a whole world of coding, computing, and um, that world, it's a pretty decent way, and that's where I got started. And then I was like, oh, I can do this with that. Oh, I can do that with that. Ooh, this wire does this. Like I started to understand basic concepts of electricity and current
Hmm.
when I typed two wires to the back of a um, watch battery and was able to make a light turn on. I'm like, this is such a simple thing. And the first time I like drew out on pencil and paper like a circuit, like I drew it, and I was
Hmm.
like, this is the coolest thing ever. Like I get it. And then what it did for me is that I now walk around the world and I look at things. I go, I know how that works.
Hmm.
Like I get it. Like I'm watching this LED on this thing do that. I'm like, I know what they're using there. I'm like, I get it. Like I understand. And so there's like this newfound appreciation for like a lot of things that we take for granted. Sometimes it's my little kids' toys I look at and go, oh, that was annoying, but like I get why it's annoying now. Like I understand why the circuit is doing this. Like I understand that there's a short. Like I get it. So and this was all self-taught. Like and I say that in the sense that I didn't come up with it myself, but I went to places online. I went to forums. I went to websites. I went to blogs, and I tried and I failed over and over again until now. I can easily take a soldering iron and whip together an LED thing and add it to whatever I want. So it's neat.
So what
So
would you
what would
say
you say
to a
to a
teacher
teacher
who's
who's
saying,
saying
like,
like,
this sounds
this
like a
sounds like
great
a great
idea.
idea?
I'm thinking about pursuing it. I want to try getting started on, say, let's just start with Raspberry Pi, right? Like, that seems interesting, but I don't even know where to start, and I'm scared because, to be honest, I think that I always thought it was a lack of motivation for teachers, but I'm starting to see there's a lot of people who want to do maker projects at home as a teacher, and they want to do that before they do that with students because they want to be comfortable with it. They want to know it. They want to see how it works. And the summer is perfect for it, right? However, at the same time, they don't know where to start, so there's confusion. But if you dive deep into the confusion, there's almost always fear of doing it wrong, fear that that they'll never get it, fear that it's going to be a waste of time, fear that, you know, cultural lies they've believed in about, you know, they're not a science person, they're not a this. So how would you, what advice would you give to that teacher who's wanting to get started but just terrified right now?
The best thing I could say is that fear is the biggest obstacle for anyone to start anything new, and it's the fear of failure.
Mhm.
Like, I don't want to try something new and embarrass myself in front of my students. I just took that and told my kids, this is brand new. I'm probably going to fail in front of you. So let's figure out why it doesn't work and go from there.
Mhm.
You know, so it's identifying one thing you want to learn and then just going for it. A bad idea would be to look at 10 things and go, I'm going to learn all 10 things. No. Um, Scaffold, and that's sort of what I did with Raspberry Pi. Was I scaffolded on top. So once I got the Raspberry Pi and figured out how to code to make a light blink, I had a light. And then I learned, well, how does the current work? So I took the next step to look at, well, how can I make this light do this? And then to the next step, I went to like, well, can I use a microcontroller, an Arduino? I baby stepped it. Like, I didn't start out the very first day and build a computer in a lunchbox. That wasn't day one. And so I tried to tell teachers, don't try to replicate what I'm doing now. Try to replicate what I did when I started a year and a half ago, which is baby step it. And the best thing to do this is to embrace the maker community, which is one of the best, most robust communities online. They are helpers. They are there because they want to help and engage other people. So, you know, when I published my first set of code on GitHub, I was just the coolest person in the world. I wrote actual code. I made a photo booth that takes pictures, places them side by side, uploads it to Dropbox. Now, I took bits of code from other places and then put them all together. So I didn't have to invent code. Like
right, which I think is actually a really important understanding that people miss. Is it's like creativity is almost always a mashup and an iteration, right? It's a mashup of multiple ideas from different places, and then it's also a new variation on what's already there.
I reached out to people that had written parts of the code and said, I'm having trouble with this. What do you think? And they emailed me back. They said, try this. I said, this is doing this now. And they're like, okay. And I put it all together and I uploaded it, and it's there. Anyone in the entire world can now download my code to create their very own photo booth. And it's all using Raspberry Pi.
Which is pretty awesome.
It is. It's like, and I did it. Like, that's like, I never would have thought. Like, I am a, you know, self-published coder. Like, what the heck? Like, yeah, high school English teacher, and now I have code out there that people can use and access and enjoy. So, yeah, like all things, I tell teachers to just take it one step at a time. And it doesn't hurt to ask questions. Reach out to me, to anyone on the internet, and say, hey, I want to do this. Where should I start it? I was just getting a couple of tweets from someone who wants to get their students started on different maker stuff. And so I said, here are some things to get started. But yeah, like if you want to get started with personal projects, start small and build your way up. I mean, if you're looking to create a space in your school, you know, I'm biased, but you should totally pick up my book, Your Starter Guide to Makerspace.
You absolutely should. Yes.
I mean, at a bare minimum, just start the conversation with your students saying, what would you want? You know, what would you want this space to be? And let them have that ownership.
And finally, this is last question. What advice would you give to teachers who want to actually create a maker space? So there are all kinds of schools who are developing maker spaces. You know, they're making it for the first time, and they're not even sure where to start. Like,
the very first step is to gather your students and stakeholders. A makerspace is only as good as the people who use it. If it's in a school, it's obviously designed for students. So if students aren't involved in the conversation from the very first, what have you created? Another space created by adults telling kids to use. You'll find out what kids want to do. You might find out that not a single kid in your school wants anything to do with 3D printing. That'll save you like $2,000 and buying a 3D printer. Like, you don't need to do those things. Like, the first thing you need to do is have that conversation with the students and say, what do you want? Like, what interests you? And let them build the space from the ground up. Because then you'll get ownership. And then it can grow in a more sort of natural, organic way, as opposed to buying a bunch of really expensive things, putting it in a space and going, how come kids aren't using it? You might find that it's a bunch of kids that want to learn to sit and knit, and you're going to spend a lot of money on yarn as opposed to filament for a 3D printer. So that's the first step, is to have that conversation, and every teacher knows who those kids are. Like if you're at a school long enough, you know who these kids are, you know where they hang out, you know what they're interested in. Just approach them and say, hey, how would you like to help build something brand new in the school? And odds are they'll say yes. And then the next thing you know, you've got these awesome spaces for kids to create and grow and make whatever they want.
So what would you do? Because you have a number of schools that haven't done that yet, right? Like, and they're launching. They're putting a makerspace in, say, first week of school, right? Do you say 100% blank slate, don't put anything in it, or do you say, let's have a space, we'll put minimal, some low-tech stuff, have flexible furniture, easy to maneuver, and then slowly build on top of that? Like, what do you think is better?
Great. Every place has its own constraints in regards to how money needs to be spent, or if it's a grant needs to be spent by this time. So, I mean, every school needs to tailor it to their specific building needs and student needs. Is it nice to have flexible seating and stuff in advance? Yes. Is that sort of like a common thing that kids, maybe don't need to be a part of the conversation? Maybe. They might say, hey, we really do need round tables, or hey, this is why we like this, or we need individual stations. Like, it's so tough to just say, put it all in there. Now, having said that, it's okay sometimes to prime the pump a little. Know that you have the money, or you got a grant designed specifically to buy a 3D printer, buy the printer, throw it in there, teach some kids how to use it, and then maybe it spreads that way. So I'm not adverse to...
Or I could almost guarantee that, like, I go back to this all the time, but, like, you're not gonna find kids who don't like duct tape. Like, go buy some duct tape. Like, there's nothing wrong with like starting with a little bit of things that you generally.
You're right. Just going to a store and getting a bunch of cardboard boxes.
Yes, absolutely.
There are simple, low tech, cheap ways to sort of fan it out, and maybe they'll start the conversation where kids go, the cardboard's cool, but I really wish I was able to do this, or I really wish that we could do that. And then you can start to put together like a wish list, and then as a group with the kids, find out way to fundraise if the funds are not available, and reaching out to local businesses for donations. So having them a part of that process, I think, is good. But priming the pump a little bit at the start of the school years is never a bad idea if you can get the right things in there.
I think sometimes on the space side, like I mentioned flexible seating, for example, but I think when people hear that, they jump to like the really expensive stuff, the steel case stuff, and that's fine. But like, to me, when I say flexible, I mean like have flexible procedures. Yeah. Like it's really funny, but like allow kids to work on the ground. It's not that tough. Let kids stand up. Like the biggest thing you can do is allow permission in your systems. Because I've seen spaces that were designed to be flexible, but the rules were inflexible, and then you might as well have desks in rows, right? Like, it ultimately comes.
Like to sit on the windowsill, and she took her notes there, or sometimes she would just stand. And I remember, what is going on? This isn't, no, we have tables, we can move these things around. Like, but I was just like, what? It works for her, and she's not being distracting. That's how she wanted to learn, and so. She was almost shocked at the same time. I was like, yeah, okay, whatever. She was just like, you don't care. I go, well, as long as you don't bug me, I guess. As long as you're not bugging anyone else and staring out the window, knock yourself out. But I go, if you're staring out the window, it's probably me, not you. That must not be very entertaining or engaging if you focus out the window. So, yeah, giving them that flexibility and really installing that mentality to the kids that this space is going to be different than the classrooms you're accustomed to. And I think once they sort of get that and feel that comfortability to come in and do things differently, you'll start to see some progress in kids making really cool things and engaging in a lot of interesting STEAM areas.
Awesome. Well, thank you. I feel like I told you it'd be a 15-minute conversation. We've been talking for 45 minutes, but I just love the thoughts that you have. If anyone's watching, please check out Nick's website. Please check out his book. Full disclosure, AJ and I are the owners of Blend, and we published it. But beyond that, I promise I would recommend Nick's book anyway, because it really is awesome. And we chose your book because as our first book for that very reason, which was you shared what you had, and I was like, this is awesome, absolutely awesome.
And for anyone out there, if you want to see what type of crazy things I'm making, you can go to the Nerdy Teacher on Instagram.
Absolutely.
I document all my crazy stuff there at thenerdyteacher.com. Is where I share a bunch of stuff as well. And the Starter Guide to Makerspaces, you can find it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever it is. You can get books online and whatnot. And, reach out. Send me a tweet, send me a message, send me an email. If you have questions or ideas or want to dive deeper, I'm totally on board with that. I think the best part about making is the community, and I feel very lucky to be part of that community and be able to help teachers who are in the same position as me just a couple of years ago.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.